crime, not to mention the all bad laws, the permissiveness of some laws, the ridiculousness of others. Like there's a whole realm where we, as the United States, if we think we're leaders, could do so much better. That to just blame our drug problem on somebody else is dumb. And so to demonize all of Latin America for our drug problem, number one, is dumb. Number two, it's a distraction, as usual, from the things that are going on here that need to be taken care of. But number three, I still have that, that feeling and that thought that that's why I asked the question, like, has anybody thought this through? Because it's so easy. You say this thing, you throw this thing out there. Now people are terrified in Venezuela. They're not sure what's going to happen. And if, anybody that's installed by the United States immediately and instantly has zero credibility with their own population down there. Many of them will be, God, people will be thrilled for Maduro to be gone. Don't get me wrong. But it's always be careful what you wish for, right? So who's going to be there instead when Americans have no clue about Latin American culture, other than to go down to our beaches in Costa Rica and, enjoy the beaches and the wildlife and the human trafficking and, other things that happen as well. So I just really, I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's very frustrating that people don't think this through, that just talk in these highfalutin terms about, drugs and this and that, and the U.S. power, it's true. This helps in one way with, maybe saber rattling, but it's actual humans down there. And I'll say this, and I put this in the chat, nobody, I think, even read it, but for example, in Costa Rica, right, I was down there when the Sandinistas took over Nicaragua. Okay, there was a dictator before Somoza, bad guy, terrible guy, very, very bad, installed and supported by the U.S. The Sandinistas then came in. The Sandinistas were communists. Well, the only reason that they came in is because the U.S. had put a dictator before, so obviously, he was suffering. So now communists say, I'm going to promise you the world, so the communists came in. But as a result of all that, our conflict, Costa Rica, we were a country of 2.5 million people. We got about 500,000 Nicaraguan refugees. I don't know if you can imagine what that does to a country that's that tiny. Up until then, our rural guards, we call them, we don't have an army in Costa Rica. We're a very peaceful country. We don't have an army. Up until then, our guards are out there, what would be equivalent of sort of the rural guards. They had guns, but they didn't, once this started happening and this regime change stuff and all this violence and the revolutions and things like that, suddenly they were being outgunned with, AK-47s and bank robberies, people that had come in from very violent nations. Our people didn't have a clue how to deal with that. Now we have narcos. Unfortunately, we do have some narcos. Our president, who's a big Trump supporter, is also tied in narcos, and that's been a problem. And now we've got Trump pushing and threatening the people of Honduras that if they don't vote for the guy that he wants, which is a right-wing guy, then he's going to cut off aid. So he's just messing with all of our lives down there. If we have military intervention in Venezuela, what's going to happen in Panama, Colombia next door? Colombia already has problems. What's going to happen in Panama? What's going to happen in Costa Rica? Because now we get refugees. It drives me crazy the way people play with our lives for political gain. And I think I should land the plane there.
Thank you for that, Barbie. I did a little bit of research. I could find nothing that has been publicly released by the Pentagon or by the White House with regard to any boots on the ground strategy subsequent to the president or in conjunction with the president suggesting that we need to take military action in Venezuela. Now, that's not to say that the Pentagon lacks contingency programs for anything that could conceivably happen in any sector of the world. So the best I could find on that, the last time anything was publicly published by the then Department of Defense, and it's been sitting on their website since then, except with the change, the top of the document now says Department of War, but was when an admiral who was in charge of the military command for that section of the world presented a paper, a contingency plan, should we have to take military action in the future in Venezuela. That was in 2017, I think, was when that was published. I was at my computer earlier. I walked away from it. I'd have to go back to get the date exact, but I think it was 2017. So, in terms of public consumption, there's not been a major update in planning with regard to any boots on the ground strategy. And of course, before you invade a country, you would want, you're not going to be able to stick to a plan, but you would want at least an outline of what you want to do before and understand what your goals are. And at least the command, if not the grunts, the command in the field ought to know what the goal is here. So I pray that if a decision is made, and I would hope it would not be absent approval from Congress, but if a decision is made, President believes he has unilateral authority to do so, to invade Venezuela, that they have it in place that doesn't put our troops in greater risk than had they not properly planned it out. So that's the best I could do for your question, your initial question, Barbie. There's probably more that can be researched on this, and if others want to delve into that and help us along with our understanding of this, that would be wonderful. Dominic, followed by David.
Hey, Gary. Happy Monday. Couple of things. What could be the concern of even people who are neutral on Trump, not even supporters of Trump, be concerned about? And I think it's that flotilla will leave the Caribbean with Maduro still in power. It would be a catastrophe of seismic proportions, and because Maduro would have won. So that's the primary risk I see to observers of President Trump, that there is no alternative to victory at this moment. Putting that aside, as we put other things aside, it's interesting that those who were critical of the second vote attack resorted to the laws of war as it being a violation of the laws of war. I guess inferring that we are at war with Venezuela because we're using the laws of war to criticize.
Wait a minute. I want to try to understand your point.
Yeah.
You're suggesting that the Hague Convention of 1917 and the subsequent Geneva Conventions with regard to the use of military might against an opposing force,
Right.
and the responsibility of that military, especially with regard to what the Hague Convention outlined, to treat those who are survived by the attack in the same manner as you would treat your own crew members while rescuing them, only applies in a declared war, not an action by a military?
I think so, but I'm not sure, Gary.
That's a very interesting argument that
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
That at least sounds impossible to accept. But maybe you're right about that. But so what? So what's the point?
So, the laws of war, and I was confused, I guess, that criticism of the military using the laws of war
Hey, this is
implied
John.
that we were at war. I didn't know.
Okay, great.
And I just wanted to mention this admiral who's being given responsibility for making this decision. If his order was to destroy the vessel, and he had flexibility in deciding what destroy meant, I can see how the spokesman would say he acted within his authority. The other point I wanted to make is, oh yes, I know, I have several, but, Congress, under Article 1, Section 8, is free to debate the use of force without presidential instigation. Ron Paul can simply make a motion to declare war against Venezuela. And they can have a full-throated debate on the issue. I just read a piece of article, and there is no proscription that it requires a president to be involved in that declaration.
So let me ask you, Dominic. So theoretically, if a member of Congress, a senator, were to be opposed to this impending potential military action in Venezuela, he or she could introduce a declaration of war. And if that declaration of war fails, would that, in your mind, prohibit the president from taking action?
I think so. Unless, of course, in that full-throated debate, there were other alternatives offered the president, like an AUMF of some sorts, a new one. The other, I don't want to go on much more than that. I think I want to go back to my original point, Gary, is that the risk to supporters of Trump is that he fails, and that Maduro is still in power when that flotilla leaves. That, I think, would be a major diplomatic and seismic failure for our country, the likes of which we really have not even scratched the surface of. So that's it. Thank you.
So that argument, I think, is analogous to the police officer pulling the gun and telling the perpetrator to drop his gun or I will shoot, and then not shooting. I don't think you could do that. I don't know whether Dominic is suggesting that he supports the concept, whether it is technically or not, of that strike on that boat. But I can tell you that I feel very uncomfortable with it on a number of levels, whether there is a loophole in the international law on that subject or not. I don't think it really matters, at least not to me. But that's me. Not everybody's going to agree with that perspective, but I find it very disconcerting. And here's the thing. If the United States gets a reputation of not assisting the crew members of a ship that the United States has attacked on the high seas, what prevents another adversary of the United States, should there be a conflict, from abandoning our sailors? If our sailors are on the disabled or sinking ship, that's why you have these agreements, I think. So I never heard this discussed from the perspective that Dominic offered. It's an interesting perspective and I guess worthy of our perusal anyway. David, followed by Marcus.
Hey, Gary. Great discussion again. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Yeah, this saber rattling, if you want to call it that, with regard to Venezuela, is really, in my opinion, more or less an attempt to take over the oil resources, or at least regime change Maduro to a regime that would be more in sympathy with our oil policies. And, to Marshall's point, the vaunted Monroe Doctrine is obviously being leveraged here. The use of drugs and drug boats and drug traffickers and narcos is obviously a way to spin, as a way to diminish any pushback by the American people, which pushed Trump in office under America First philosophy. And I guess if you want to go hemispheric and look at the Monroe Doctrine, he is in a way putting America first. If you look at it from a regional, geohemispheric standpoint, that's exactly what he's doing. And of course, Americans don't like to see Americans die from drug overdoses. We've all known somebody, or a family member, a friend, or an acquaintance who's been a victim of that. And God forbid anybody that knows anybody's been killed by fentanyl, from children to, all stripes on our country. So there's the backdrop that he's using. And obviously the debates around these extrajudicial killings with military strikes is how that plays out under this administration, who's been doing an end run around pardons for people from all types of crimes that should still be sitting in prison. I don't know who's going to do jail time over this, going forward, and how it's going to get litigated. I'm hoping that Congress is bipartisan in its attempt to get to the bottom of this, because it's a bad look internationally. And again, it's a bad look for our soldiers who are overseas and their lives are on the line. And we hope that those countries are going to follow the same protocols of war, Geneva Convention doctrines, so that we don't lose lives over there as a result of the retaliation for stuff like this. We already know how Islamic fundamentalism treats our captured. We know the extents that they'll go to kill us over there. Same thing with Israel and other societies like that. So yeah, if we want to tame this, we have to be the lead country with regard to these aggressions. All right, you just saw Pakistan give lifetime immunity to their generals. And the argument that they made was the citation of the Supreme Court giving President Donald Trump, presidential immunity. So we're seeing how our examples are of implementing these laws and the international framework of war being used by other countries when we decide something different. And so that's the dangerous aspect of this. Now, it isn't about drugs either, Gary, because he just pardoned the former president of Honduras, gentleman by the name of Hernandez, and he was convicted of turning Honduras and Central America into a cocaine superhighway. He was given 4 decades.
Into the United States.
And into the United States, exactly. Not to mention his brother got a lifetime sentence for similar crimes against America and with drug trafficking and DH for part of this litigation. Trump's absolute lunacy, and this giving these guys creative license to do whatever they want. And he was president of a country. He wasn't Pablo Escobar. He wasn't Chapo, who's sitting in prison now. Had been known to give this guy over $1 million plus in bribe. So what are we talking about here? Why is this guy getting off scot-free? And then you have his press secretary Levitt saying that that this was a Biden administration overreach, that Joe Biden took this guy down. And so once again, the ghost of Joe Biden's president continues to haunt us with regard to Trump's excuses for his failings. Gary, the one big blow here is regard to Venezuela is to China. China has given billions of dollars to the Maduro regime in exchange for oil. This goes back into the Chavez regime, where Chavez was the first guy that started this whole socialist revolution utilizing the architecture of what Cuba and Castro were doing. So China stands to lose, in Trump's terms, bigly here if we take out Maduro, because all those contracts are going to be invalidated. Their Belt and Road Initiative that they exported to Venezuela is under siege. Social programs that they were trying to finance, it's just kind of how China tries to use its soft power. So I think that's front and center, a part of this campaign as well. Not to mention Iran's collusion with Maduro. So we have a whole host of countries here that we can't take China on militarily or even economically. So we're gonna have to pick apart, go after their alliances, and particularly alliances that again are in our hemisphere that we see as disrupting our economic oil.
The question becomes: do you see the Monroe Doctrine as an invalid doctrine? That would be, if we didn't enforce that. I'm not saying you have to be harsher and invade the country, because I don't think you have to. But one of the defensible national security rationale seems to be the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary. Thou shalt not be from other countries and screw with the Western Hemisphere, period.
Well, that speaks to back then when that doctrine was written. These were colonies of Spain. These were colonies of Portugal. These weren't sovereign nations. So the emergence of these sovereign nations calls into question our Monroe Doctrine principles, because these countries have a voice, have their own sovereign way in which to defend themselves. And are we violating international law by incurring, like Trump just said, hey, we're going to shut down your airspace? When have we ever done that to a country, a sovereign nation? Right?
I also could say things and they become so, right? Like, obviously.
Well,
look, I think the Monroe Doctrine is still useful. I disagree with you there. I think the Monroe Doctrine is still useful for the West place, in the U.S.
But these nations aren't signatories to our Monroe Doctrine. This was an arbitrary policy. Was that?
It's an imperial policy.
Right, exactly. It's an imperial policy. And so we're seeing a lot of these blows to our empire with regard to China's incursion again into Venezuela. And maybe they're not going to take a military approach to Venezuela, because that would further embolden us to take a military approach against if and when they decide to take Taiwan.
But it doesn't mean we should let the Chinese continue to engage in their national interest in the Western Hemisphere. I mean,
Marshall, I have to leave in 2 minutes. If you want to give me a chance to talk, but it doesn't matter. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay,
I'm be done right now.
what I wanted to say too is that you got to also remember, Marshall, Trump campaigned on drill, baby, drill, and he's running into issues with regard to drilling in Florida, where Deepwater Horizon caused all that environmental and natural disaster to the coastlines, to the fishing industries, to the tourism. Getting pushed back in California, where I live. You can see the ocean behind my picture here. There are billions and billions of gallons of barrels of oil to be drilled off our coastline, but the people don't want it because of the potential damage to the environment, right? So Venezuela is a target here to help secure more of those drilling capabilities and not have to necessarily go after our own resources off our shores, which is a political nightmare for anybody trying to do that. So I just wanted to also bring that to the conversation. But what happens to Venezuelan people getting on land here is that clearly there's a lot of loyalty to the Bolivarian regime. The military has backstopped Maduro because they've been allowed to enrich themselves through their own graft on their own economy. And so I think when gringos coming in to try to blow up the place, the people will solidify around that. Very much the same way the people of Iran were sort of coalescing around the flag, even though they don't like the regime. They don't necessarily like Israel coming in and bombing them to try to get regime change. So I think that is a difficult mentality for us to conquer in taking out Maduro. Not to mention Venezuela is a large country. It's pockmarked by jungles and deserts and guerrilla warfare that would probably emerge out of nowhere. So I think all of that is a bad scenario for us to even attempt. And we're going to lose troops, Gary. That's the other thing. We're going to lose troops. So whatever Trump campaigned on with regard to not risking American U.S. servicemen's lives, we're going to lose a lot of them trying to topple this guy, in my opinion. And I'll end there.
Thank you for that, David. We are now at 5:59 Eastern Time, so we are not inviting anybody else onto the stage. However, if you're on the stage now and in queue, we will now go into extra time at the top of the hour to allow everyone in queue an opportunity to speak. We will now go to Marcus, followed by Merrill.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So I have very mixed feelings. I have family in Colombia. I know people in Venezuela right now. And I would say Venezuela is a failed state, unlike Taiwan, unlike Ukraine. But I'm not, even the idea of boots on the ground and taking over Venezuela is just nonsense. That's not going to work. But obviously, it's a failed state. A third has left the country. They have more oil, 3 times as much as Russia in their ground, more than Saudi Arabia. It could be the richest country in South America. They wanted to invade Guyana at the beginning of the year, just put that in your memory. And the Nobel Prize winner, Maria Corina Machado, is in hiding since the election, in danger of losing her life. The former contester, Juan Guaido, who was in Congress, is in Miami. Leopoldo Lopez is in Spain. So it's a country in shambles. They would argue it's because of the United States, but obviously this is that's only an excuse. So mixed feelings because I think Trump the world order is basically shrinking to one last remnant there is, and that's nuclear power, period. Everything else doesn't matter. So Trump basically has this fantasy of Putin takes over Ukraine, probably is going to happen unless our last attempt will work. Taiwan, and this is not a failed state, is going to be the prey of the Chinese. And so why not me messing a little bit with Venezuela? I think that's his idea. I don't think it's a good karma, and I don't think boots on the ground is even an option. Regime change is complex, and I don't think Trump has the complexity to think through that. So I think this is just, as one said, a gambling with like options, which I think the US could lose. It's not a high likelihood that this will be in any way any good outcome for us. So I don't think this is the right way to do it. But yes, Venezuela is a failed state, unlike Taiwan. Sorry to say, to my friend Tiger.
Thank you for that, Marcus. I'm glad you stuck around. Merrill, followed by Steve.
Well, I'm probably going to be the most uninformed person on the stage. I have a lot of questions. Very curious about a lot of things. I will begin by saying I also have a bias. I do not think that Trump has the quality of advisors, the Pentagon, General, anybody that works with him, that advises him, that is smart, brilliant, knows what they're doing, or that he listens to. So I start there. Now, when I learned about all of this, it was Trump was going and blowing up boats because of fentanyl. They were bringing fentanyl to this country, and he was going to stop the fentanyl. I haven't heard fentanyl mentioned in days. I have heard cocaine mentioned. I heard Mark Kelly talk about that in actuality, the boats that are being blown up might be the cocaine boats because they're taking a different route than fentanyl boats take if they're coming to the United States. These are not. These are not the route that the fentanyl boats take, that these are more like the cocaine and it goes to Europe or wherever. So that I'm kind of confused about. The other issue is we don't know. There has been no, as far as I understand, there is no declaration of war yet. Correct? Am I correct in that?
Obviously, there is no declaration of war.
So then what we are doing is murdering people. In all actuality, that is murder. Literally, that is murder. If there's no declaration of war, that is murder. On the general now, or the admiral who's taking or being thrown under the bus, whatever, we never would have known about that this ever happened, the second one. We never hear of the second bombing or going after that. We never hear about them having to clean up debris. We always just heard they blew up a boat. And I think that we never would have heard about this had it not been, and I believe it started with the senators talking about do not honor illegal laws, illegal orders. And then all of a sudden now we start to hear about this that happened in September, by the way. And we start to hear about this and that you do not blow up. Oh, by the way, too, there's videos. We're going to want to see those videos. There's automatic. The videos go the minute you shoot the bomb. There's a video. It's automatic. So we're going to want to see that second video. And I still don't quite understand. Somebody's saying I did the order, but is he saying I did the order to kill 2 unarmed people in the wreckage? We haven't heard that. I mean, I think that changes things, doesn't it? If you've got 2 unarmed people that are there, do you do the second one? That's, to me, that's where I'm confused. And I could be way off on this. But that's one of the things. The other things, I've never heard once yet that any of these boats are shooting at the United States, are doing anything to us. Have there been anything? Have we ever met anybody that's tried to contact us, use arms, use anything to us to blow us up? I haven't heard that. So that makes me also wonder. And do we know? My understanding too is that the Senate has said, what Mark Kelly and those people said, Mark Kelly said in an interview, is they're not getting enough information from Trump to know what's really going on. Is he at this line? Has he crossed a line? We don't really know yet. Now we're hearing he wants to go into Venezuela on the ground. What are we doing? Is this all really just for a regime change? Is it for oil? Was it really for drugs? What is all of this for? Is this just Trump playing Risk? Like we used to play when we were in high school or junior high, and Trump, just wanting to play and blow things up and think that he can go into a country because it's weak and he can take over that country or throw out a regime. I just have so many questions, and I don't know if I'm the only person who has those questions. Maybe I'm just the most uninformed person. Thank you.
So the one thing I would say is that the United States, the last time the United States declared war was World War II. And yet we've been involved in numerous conflicts that were, whether they were officially wars or not, certainly they were wars. Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan and others. So there are ways around, which I don't agree with, by the way. I believe the Constitution is pretty clear that it requires a declaration of war, but they've passed different legislations in Congress to fund certain war actions. Now, I believe we've discussed this before, I don't have it in front of me right now, that the president can engage without the authorization of Congress for a limited period of time, a very short period of time, and then has to go back to Congress for some kind of approval if he wants to continue whatever military action.
It allows him to do
That's
it.
under the War Powers Act, yeah. So, the fact that there's been no war declared, I agree with you conceptually, that's probably not cool, but I don't think it was very cool any other time that the United States has subverted the will of the Constitution by taking military action. But, it doesn't matter whether there's a declared war or not, and whether we call it a war or not. You're absolutely correct that we are shooting out of the water boats that do not threaten our military. It's not like you have to shoot them because they're going to shoot you. They're shooting them out to make a point that we're not going to allow drug trafficking out there. Now, some people think that's a good thing. But I think even folks who felt that that was a good thing, most of them, obviously not all, but most of them, are in agreement with Mero and myself and the others who have expressed concern about the secondary attack. I don't understand. Maybe it was not an argument that Dominic was making. Maybe it was just a philosophical question he was asking, which is very possible. But I just want to counter that philosophical comment by underscoring it's not right under any ethical or moral or probably legal scrutiny to do what they did. I just can't see how anyone, this is my personal opinion, can justify, once you've blown the boat out of the water, going back and making sure everybody that was on the boat is dead with a second attack. That's not how we conduct ourselves as a nation, at least not officially. There may be cases, of course have been cases in history. The My Lai massacre is a prime example, but that was not officialdom. That was a decision that was made on the ground, and it doesn't make it any less heinous, but they were going contrary to the rules of engagement. This apparently is not contrary to the rules of engagement. I think every American should be appalled by this. Howard, did you want to jump in?
I think what we have here is a president who ran on certain things and he said drugs, and I'm going to stop fentanyl from coming in. And he came up with this idea, we're going to blow up the boats. He's been blowing up boats since at least September. I think there's something like 67. How many boats has he blown up? 67 or something like that?
I don't know. I just read the figure 80 people supposedly were killed in these attacks.
So he's blowing up boats. And I think that he then is coming up with some other reason. Well, maybe I'll go out, I'll change the regime here or something. I don't think it starts that way. I think it started out with a president who said, I'm going to do this. This is what I can do, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to blow them up, and this is this, and this is this, and this is this. And that's what I think has happened. And I think it's pretty awful, because if this has been going on this long, then Congress should have known about it. And I have a lot of concerns, and I have a lot of concerns. I want to watch that admiral and see how many people is that admiral going to, you can go to jail for life, or you can be executed. So I want to know.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go to Steve Wine, followed by Steve Abell. Steve.
Yeah, there's a couple things. The question was asked earlier, do we have a plan? I lived outside of Fort Bragg for about 17 years and got to know a lot of people that worked in the Special Warfare Operations Center over there. I don't know if the room's active there, but I guarantee you the room's active somewhere. One of my friends, his job was to go in that room and pick a scenario somewhere in the world and war game it out. They do this all over the world. They're constantly war gaming. And when you got a situation that's emerging like you have down in Venezuela, believe me, they've war gamed this out before. They've looked at it, they've got an assessment on it, and they're probably refining it as we speak. So there's that. The idea that we don't have some kind of comprehensive plan that's been devised and it's being fine-tuned right now is just, if you believe that, you don't know anything about these special operators. But the second thing is, and I hear this all the time, and it's a misconception, I think. Well, there's a demand in the United States for these drugs that are coming in and killing everyone. Well, anyone that's ever seen the drug trade operate, one of the things the drug dealers do, and they do it very well, they farm their demand. That's like if you want someone to start doing this particular product, you send a bunch of your low-level guys out and you hand it out and you let people get high on it and you get them liking it. And then once you got them on it, then you drop the hammer on the price. So this idea that it's just some kind of way generically manifests itself into these addictions is patently wrong. It's a blatant misunderstanding of how the drug trade works. Third thing is, you mentioned the Hague Convention, didn't you, Gary? Was that in like 1909?
1917.
1917. I wonder if the Japanese, when we was fighting in the Pacific and they blew one of their ships up and we had guys in the water, how many of those guys you think made it out of the water, Gary?
I don't know whether it was adhered to during World War II by our side or their side, but what does that have to do with whether or not it ought to be adhered to today? So fundamentally, do you agree with what the Hague Convention says, or do you disagree with it?
No, I tell you what I disagree with, because I've seen the results of it up close and personal. I disagree with ever handcuffing the military in any way, shape, or form. Go talk to some of the men that came out of Fallujah, where they sent those men door to door because they wouldn't surround the city and drop some pamphlets in and say, come out or we're going to annihilate you. To a man, you'll find these guys coming out and saying, man, I'm messed up for life. Okay, if that's a price you're willing to pay on your fellow man when you send him into conflict, that he comes back carrying that burden, you need to be aware that's what you're doing.
Is that a fair analogy, Steve, to the instant that we are discussing?
Yeah, I think it is.
I'll tell you why. What harm what extra harm's way are we putting our troops in if we launch a rescue effort for those two surviving people from that boat?
Well, you don't know, do you, Gary? Do you know that you wouldn't be putting them in some kind of harm's way? Do you know that there couldn't be another vessel? Do you know that there couldn't be possibly small submarines operating those waters waiting for an American to drop in? Do we know that? Of course we don't. We don't know the potential danger.
You're throwing in what ifs on things that you're right. We don't know.
When a man's life's on the line, you better what if.
So you
better
believe
not go in.
So you believe that the order to kill those two crew members that were hanging onto the debris of the demolished boat was a proper action by our U.S. military?
I'm not familiar with all the details that you're describing, but I tell you what I do believe, because I've seen it on the faces of men that's been put into combat, that's been handcuffed by stuff
But
and
we're
come
not
back
talking
and
about Fallujah right now. We can have an argument
yeah, we
about.
are. You're talking about military action,
We're
Gary.
not
You're talking
about
you're talking
Fallujah.
about potentially putting men in harm's way.
I think we could have, at some point, a discussion about the rules of engagement in the Iraq War and whether the Iraq War and whether that was an appropriate rule of engagement to have. But that's not what we're discussing here. I think
What we're discussing is military action, and we're discussing putting men in harm's way when it's not necessary. That's what we're discussing.
Okay, so I'm simply asking you, and you've neglected to answer it. I think I know your answer by what you're saying, but I don't want to make the assumption. Are you saying that it was proper for them to kill those guys after the boat was blown up?
If it was determined they was doing what they was doing, that the first strike was proper, the second strike was too. Because what you're doing, and what no one's willing to acknowledge is, when you engage in military action, any event that takes place, men are put at potential harm. And the question you have to ask yourself, at what point do you say it's okay to put them at risk, and for what reason?
And do you really believe that that's the reason they killed those other two guys? So it's not.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't. Like I say, I'm a little vague on this situation, so I'm not dealing with all the facts here. As a general principle is what I'm talking about. Anytime you engage, and look, these guys running these boats, I've heard people say, well, they could be fishermen. We got satellites on this place. We know where the operations are coming from. They probably even got pictures of these guys loading cocaine or whatever dope they're putting on those boats at the port. To think that we don't know what's in these boats is asinine. And I want to tell you what, I never hear people talking about these guys engaged in this. Why don't you go bury one of your own that's died from this stuff? Because these guys are bringing this dope into the country. Go stand beside. I had to stand beside my sister as she dropped her daughter into a grave because of this. Go stand there and see how much empathy you have for these guys on this boat that may be carrying something that could end up killing thousands of people. So evidently, when he jumped on that boat and he engaged in this type of activity, all the death and mayhem and destruction we see in the United States, he didn't have too much care for that, did he? Probably didn't cross his mind. 10 or 50 of them died because of this thing that I'm doing? Oh, well. But we're supposed to have some kind of indignation that people that's bringing dope into the United States that's going to kill Americans, that because they got taken out in a boat strike, that somehow we're the bad guy? Everybody that thinks that ought to go stand beside a grave as someone's child's being dropped into that grave. Stand there and then ask yourself that question then.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Is it possible in your mind? Is it possible in your mind, Steve, that a person could be empathetic to the plight of your family and what your sister went through, and also be concerned about the manner in which this is being prosecuted by the government? Is it an absolute that you have to take one of those points or the other?
Maybe, Gary, but I want to tell you what, I guarantee you there was not one person involved in the drug trade, because I've known these characters from the younger part of my life. There's not one guy that would care hoots about a kid being dropped into a grave. They probably sit there.
But we're not talking about their perspective.
Oh yeah, we are.
No,
yeah,
we're not.
Yeah, we are, because we're talking about how we deal with people that do that to our people.
The question was not about their perspective. I agree with you about their perspective. I'm talking about your perspective and mine and everyone else in this room and all of America. That's a different perspective than the perspective of drug dealers.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, I'll just leave it this. People can take whatever they want to from this. I really don't care, because I've seen more than just my sister's child going to a grave. The thought that after watching young people having their lives taken from them because of this activity, that I would care about how we deal with these people. No, dude. I'm going to tell you what, if I would have found the guy that had done that to my sister's child, there wouldn't have been no articles of convention in how I dealt with him, Gary.
So let me
You're assuming that everyone on the boat's a drug dealer, basically. That's what you're assuming.
Howard, do you think, honestly, Howard, do you think that we do not have enough intelligence to see where those drugs are coming from?
Okay,
And actually,
so if we do, then how come that's not being shared with other members of Congress, like on the House Services Committee and in the Senate and with the House of Representatives? Why is it so secretive? How do we know?
Well, I don't know.
If there's cause, there's cause. But where's the proof? Where's the case being made? And where's the confidence that the people in charge are making the right decision?
Do you really think we don't have the capability, intelligence capability, to see where these things are coming and where they're going on a boat? You think?
Yeah, I don't think we have it because you have members of the House Services Committee saying that they're shut out of the information, that they don't have the information.
Shut out doesn't
So
mean
where's the
the information
transparency,
wasn't
Steve?
gathered.
You're talking about life and death and killing people.
Oh yeah, we're talking about life and death.
That's right. And that's right.
When we talk about the
there's
Americans'
risk.
life and
Without
death.
the proof, it's such a gravity of a decision. Without the right proof and the justification, there's a pretty high standard that needs to be met. And it sounds like, from what the media is reporting, that no, there isn't that transparency, there isn't that communication, there isn't that alignment. And my view is, until there is that alignment, that you've got to really be serious about taking military action, because there's not enough justification to have it done. And until there's proof, great. If those are people taking cocaine or fentanyl, great. But until that's proven, then just killing people just because you're upset about tragedy from the past, I'm sorry, that's not justification in my book.
You know, Howard, if these people loading these boats with 4 and 5 and 6 engines in them, I'm sure that's your normal fishing boat, Howard. So
let's set that aside.
Want to.
Let's set that question aside for a moment, and let me pursue just with an analogy the question I asked you earlier. You are on a city council in your town in West Virginia, and you've told me and you've told the room that one of your responsibilities has been to oversee the police department. So if your police department got word that there was a drug house up and they're selling drugs on the streets of your town and from that house, and kids are buying those drugs and potentially dying as a result of it, would you feel comfortable with raiding that house absent a search warrant, or would you require them to do their due diligence and gather the evidence before raiding that house?
Well, you're right. I'd require them because I couldn't operate any other way and be within the law, Gary.
Well, so the same question is raised, I think, here. The question is not do we want to stop or don't want to stop the drug trade. The question is the military acting within the law in the manner in which they are interdicting these boats?
Well, I don't know what legal standard applies on the high seas. That's a question.
Well, we were discussing the Hague Convention 10 of 1917.
That's not a legal standard for the United States.
It is a standard for the United States. It's been established in international law ever since. And I'm sure, I wish Hansen wasn't boycotting the room. I hope he's boycotting it and he's not sick, because he hasn't been here in a while. But I'm sure he would underscore that there are rules of engagement to which the United States has agreed to adhere. And that's one of the rules of engagement that the United States, it's long established as international law and U.S. policy. So, so would you say that international law and U.S. policy ought to be ignored because of the reasons that you delineated earlier?
No, I'm just saying that's what it is. It's international law. It's not law that was passed by the U.S. House, went to the Senate and signed by the President. It's
Well,
international law.
if we're signatory to an accord, then it has the weight of a law in the United States as well. But you can look it up, or I can look it up, or somebody who's better versed in this
you're
can
probably right,
put this
Gary.
up for both of us.
I'm not going to argue that point. You're probably right. But I just, I've seen the damage that these people have done to my community. I've seen the damage.
I agree. I've seen the damage too. You know that I was a reporter. I was a reporter on the streets of Detroit, and I've been there. I've seen it all. I've lived through it. I know how horrific it is, and I still feel uncomfortable with what they did, especially with that one boat where they killed those guys after they had already blown the boat out of the water. So it doesn't mean that because I'm concerned about that, I'm not concerned about the drugs that are flowing into your town. Of course I am.
Yeah.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Well, I could be too emotional on this point, Gary, because I'm tied too closely with horrific results. So maybe my thinking's clouded a bit here.
And it's important for you to articulate your concerns and for us to hear that articulation. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
We'll go from Steve Wine to Steve Appel, and Brent fell off, but he came back in, so we'll go after Steve to Brent. Steve.
Gary, thank you for holding the space. Hello, everybody. Gary, I grew up on a fishing boat before I was a teenager. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that any captain of a boat, be it a 15-foot fishing boat or a 1,000-foot warship, is required to help a shipwrecked crew, a drowning person, as long as it does not place their own vessel, crew, or passengers in danger. This is a legal obligation that includes rendering all practical and necessary aid, and if unable to provide the aid directly, required to call for assistance to the authorities, such as the Coast Guard. This is a fact. It's undisputed. Now, under the Geneva Convention and international humanitarian law, a combatant who is incapacitated, surrenders, or otherwise unable to fight, i.e. a blown up boat, and they're only being able to tread water because they've got shipwrecks that they're holding on to, must be treated humanely. This includes shipwrecked, drowning enemy personnel who have the same protections as the wounded and sick. This applies on land or at sea or in any type of rescue efforts. There's a huge difference, Gary, between driving on the freeway and seeing a car crash and just driving by versus if you're in a boat, again, a 20-foot fishing boat or a 1,000-foot warship, and you see people that are in the water and arguably are going to be drowned. When you're driving on the freeway, there's no obligation for you to stop and help. But if you're the captain of a ship, and by the way, again, it's the last time I'll say this, 20, 30-foot sport fishing vessel or 1,000-foot warship, you have an obligation by law to help, at the least to call for assistance, and as long as it doesn't put you in danger, arguably to get those people out of the water. And if you've ever been the captain of a ship, or if you've ever been in the water, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That being said, The only thing that I've heard from Trump about Venezuela is fentanyl, fentanyl, fentanyl. And Gary, I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. I grew up before being a teenager during the Vietnam War. I grew up in my 20s, El Salvador, Nicaragua. I grew up later on in regards to Afghanistan, the Iran, the Iraq war. We have interests in Venezuela, oil versus geopolitical stabilization in the region. And I think that this fentanyl is just an excuse. That's my humble opinion. But I can tell you for a 100% certainty, if you've bombed a ship and you've got people in the water, the ship is incapacitated, and those people are subject to drowning, you have an obligation to get them out of the water. And you bomb them a second time, that is a violation of the simple decency of human beings and the Geneva Convention. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Steve. And Brent, you get the last word.
So I want to address the subject first, but if I could find a place to pull over, I did your homework that you assigned me, so I'd be happy to relay my kind of thoughts on that. But I'm currently driving, so I gotta see. I don't want to create a safety hazard to repeat your homework for you. On the kind of what's next for Venezuela, I mean, I think there's two things here. One is kind of looking at it through a domestic lens for the U.S., and the other is like there's been a lot of talk about whether this was a war crime, but not a ton of talk about like what is like actually next for the country of Venezuela itself. And I think those are kind of two different things that we might want to consider. I think for the U.S. kind of domestic sphere, I think you kind of have two elements. One is is this action kind of illegal? And I would argue, frankly, it very likely is. Use of force without some sort of congressional statement saying we can, it's never really been done. It's never really been done. There's a reason why Colin Powell spent time, convincing Congress before we went in. There's a reason why, that we've have spent time traditionally, getting kind of congressional consent, because you're right, it is implied in the Constitution that is a requirement. I think there's a constitutional balance between inherent powers of the commander-in-chief and kind of the right for Congress to declare war, and I think that's something that is kind of that is kind of balanced between those two. But there's certainly a congressional role, and this president has been steamrolling, frankly, over the congressional role in a way that I think is pretty unprecedented. That's kind of the first thing to note on the rule of law aspect. I think the second thing is, I was in the military, and I was in the Army, unlike Anson and his experience in the Navy. But one of the first things about rule of law they teach you is, if you're clearing an objective and you essentially kill or have the enemy become non-able to resist, you don't get to go back and just kill them. Like that is an inherent law of order violation, and I think it's interesting that might have come from the Secretary of Defense. And this kind of leads me to the other domestic aspect, is that I do find it interesting now that the Republican Party seems to be willing to show some oversight over this. Mike Rogers, both the Senate and the House, seem like they're going to do real oversight into this call. And, as kind of somebody who does pay a little bit of attention to domestic politics, it is interesting to see that break from the administration, because we haven't seen it before. And I think that is an interesting aspect of this too. Now, turning now to Venezuela, what is next for them? I think there's like three general possibilities. I think one is this interference works. You have a situation where Maduro is thrown out, whether it's a golden parachute or however it occurs, and you have an opposition there that takes its place, and that opposition is relatively formed and relatively, I think, able to kind of take over the country. So that I think would be relatively positive. I think the other possibility is Maduro stays. I think that's an obvious possibility. But the possibility nobody's really talking about, and I think the New York Times had a kind of a war game on it, is the possibility that it just becomes sheer chaos. In other words, this is the Colin Powell, you broke it, you bought it, Pottery Barn situation. And I think that is really, at least I would argue, that is really the kind of the most dangerous situation that we could find ourselves in. And we'll see what happens, but I think that is the most kind of dangerous situation that we could find ourselves in. I'll hold for a second, because I know I've said a lot, and I'll deal with your homework assignment if you have the time.
If you're ready to go with it.
Hang on, let me find it. I just found a place to pull over. It is. Sorry, I just had it up a second ago. Oh, here we go. All right, I got it. I jotted down my books and articles. So I'm gonna make two basic points that kind of related to it here. One is that essentially conservative media outlets stay on message, that they're far more opinion driven, and that they kind of create a much more kind of focused programming. And then the second point is that I'll make a point that, or the rest of my sources will make the point that conservative news consumers rely heavily on just a small subsegment of very partisan news. So that's the kind of 2 points that these sources back up. The first source I'll bring out is a book titled Networked Propaganda, and it is out of kind of Harvard Law, and the research essentially shows that is structurally different, that more conservative news sources kind of form a loop, whereas sources like the New York Times are more likely to follow kind of more traditionalist fact-finding articles. You'll see more articles that don't fit the liberal narrative. Like read the Clinton email story for one. A shorter version of that. Blame Fox on Facebook for fake news. That was both published in the Washington Post, and it's just the author making that point that GOP messaging, that conservative outlets stay much more tightly aligned to GOP messaging. next article, it'd be Fox Corporation's report on news versus opinion bias. That makes similar points about misinformation. They cite in that one Fox's own legal filings was the Dominion case and the and primetime commentary, including the former Tucker Carlson sheet. Next is a peer-reviewed article entitled "Introducing Sham Journalism, Newsmax," and that shows that Newsmax is even more likely to show kind of misinformation. And it focused there on the Durham investigation. And then finally, for my first point, is a Pew Center report, The State of News Media, and that one just shows the amount of commentary that is kind of conservative driven on Fox News and more conservative outlets. Second point I'd make is one, conservatives tend to only stay in that kind of very aligned echo chamber. First article I'd point to that is the political gap in America's news services. That shows that Republicans and that's a Pew Research report that shows Republicans overwhelmingly rely on Fox News, 57%, or other kind of aligned ones, whereas there's a much more diversified news diet among liberal voters. Second source would be a peer-reviewed article titled "Political Science Research and Methods." That's using web browser data, so they're looking at kind of liberal conservative web browser data, and is pointing out that again, kind of the same point as the Pew report, that they're only kind of going to the more conservative, far-right leaning sources. A third one that kind of backs up that is America's trust in news media, partisan differences. That shows that Republicans, again, only trust a very, very few outlets, whereas Democrats have a much wider range of trust in mainstream news organizations. And then final piece is a 2021 Florida Atlantic University piece called "Fox News versus MSNBC, 52,000 transcripts." It shows Fox audience is more than 90% Republican, even though MSC skews Democratic. Liberal viewers consume many other news outlets, so kind of similar reporting. So I just run through all this to kind of back up the point I was making the other day, is that conservative media is much more focused on Republican messaging than liberal media, and much more in tune to staying on message than other sources of media, and that the average more conservative news consumer is more likely to stay in that ecosystem. And I would just argue that creates a systematic advantage for the Republican Party information environment.
I think a couple of things that you said there, that there were fewer conservative outlets, and the fact that you were lumping, at least in one of the, not you, but the researcher were lumping in one of the reports, the opinion makers, along with the journalists, kind of argues against the point that you were making on Friday. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. New York time. So until 5 p.m. New York time tomorrow, for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
Aaron, specifically.
The right to kill those who would thwart peace rights. The slave shall serve. Love is the law, love under will. The law of the strong, this is our law, and the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will, do that, and no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, Master Marion, Freedom, Rival, Alistair Crowley, Alistair Crowley, the Master, Alistair Crowley. Man has a right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to pay as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has a right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, or build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and will, love as he will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart peace rights. The slave shall serve, love is the law, love under will. The law of the strong, this is our law, and the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right to do that, will do that, and no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, Master Marion, Freedom, Rival, Alistair Crowley, Alistair Crowley, the Master, Alistair Crowley. Man has a right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has a right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, or build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and will, love as he will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart peace rights. The slave shall serve, love is the law, love under will. The law of the strong, this is our law, and the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the Lord. Thou hast no right but to do thy will, do that, and no one shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, Master Marion, Freedom, Rival, Alistair Crowley, Alistair Crowley, the Master, Alistair Crowley. Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. A man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and will love as he will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. The slave shall serve. Love is the law, love under will. The law is strong. This is our law, the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no one shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, master theory, freedom, rebel, Crowley, the master Aleister Crowley. Man has the right to live by his own law. To live in the way that he wills, to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and love as you will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. The slave shall serve. Love is the law, love under will. The law is strong. This is our law, the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will, do thy. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, master theory, I'm free to be rebel. Aleister Crowley, Aleister Crowley, the master Aleister Crowley. Man has the right to live by his own law. To live in the way that he wills, to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and will love as he will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has the right to kill those who thwart these rights. The slave shall serve. Love is the law, love under will. The law is strong. This is our law, the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will, do that, and no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, master theory, and freedom. Aleister Crowley, Aleister Crowley, the master Aleister Crowley. Man has a right to live by his own law. To live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has a right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has a right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has a right to love as he will, take you from the will of love as he will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has a right to kill those who would thwart these rights. Slaves shall serve. Love is the law. Love under will, the law is strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man on the rights of man. Master Mary, afraid of her, to rob the house to crowd it, house to crowd it. Man has the right to live by his own law. Man has a right to live by his own law. To live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has a right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has a right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has a right to love as he will, take up in the will of love as he will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has a right to kill those who would want these rights. Slaves shall serve. Love is the law. Love under will. The law is strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man. Master daring, afraid of her, robber, Alice to Crowley, Alice to Crowley. Man has the right to live by his own law. Man has the right to live by his own law. To live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take you in the will of love as you will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. Slaves shall serve. Love is the law. Love under will. The law is strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that and no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man. Master Darius, afraid of her, robber, Alice to Crowley, Alice to Crowley. Man has the right to live by his own law.
Awards panel, all the classic miracles.
What is the argument from skepticism?
Wait, just give me 1 second. My girlfriend just got home.
That's a miracle. That's more of a miracle than anything he said, bro. Damn. Hey, that's the Ethan that there's like some young kid who's like a dork and
Yeah, he's super into miracles. That's the guy.
Oh my goodness.
CM, this is a dude who thinks miracles are real and that they prove.
Specifically Catholicism.
Oh man, I wanted to talk to him.
Yeah, what's your favorite anti-flat Earth argument?
What happened?
Yeah, what's your favorite anti-flat Earth argument?
Oh, dude, I just got out of talking.
Sam's been roasting the flat earthers.
Yeah, but I'm asking your favorite argument.
Sam believes the earth is flat.
Again, did he just say that his evidence for God argument is miracles?
Yeah, it did.
Is this Ethan?
But anyway, Sam, what?
But, you know, who knows? I mean, people are saying, just, you know, wait. I mean, we have, it's going to be within the next, what? It doesn't Supreme Court in this little session within the next, like, week or something?
Yeah, they go into, what you call it? They go into recess until next year.
Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do.